Before we get to questions, we've got samples, and everybody is at the ready. So Wayne, what do we have tonight?
Good evening, Kim, again. And I've got hollyhock leaf miner. Last year, for those viewers that watch regularly, I brought this in late in the year because we had a second round of this. This is actually the time of year we would be expecting to see hollyhock leaf miner.
Okay.
I was fortunate. This is my only one, so our viewers get to benefit from that. They start at the narrow end of the mine, which is down here, and then they snake their way through, feeding on the middle layer of the leaf, leaving the top and the bottom. And they're usually not a major problem with hollyhocks, just something that if you don't like it, pluck the leaf and call it good.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Wayne. Zach, multiple turfages.
Multiple turf. Have a bunch of seed heads. Our cool season grasses in our lawns are seeding right now. Bluegrass, tall fescue are seeding right now and getting lots of calls about these guys. And very natural for these guys. They will see if I can get that a little bit closer to you. And natural phenomenon. They seed at this time of the year. These seeds would have to stay on the stalk for about 2 or 3 months before they become viable. So they're not viable. So you can go ahead and keep mowing those and not worry about mulching them or putting them into the garden. They won't germinate. But the couple of issues that we have with this is that these seed stalks are really, really tough. They're full of lignin and they don't mow very well, and you end up shredding. I don't know if they can zoom in on this, but they end up shredding the leaf. And a day or two after mowing, if it ever dries out, the lawn has a white haze to it, or patches of the lawn has a white haze. And so that's just a natural phenomenon. Mow as often as you can, mow with as sharp of a blade as you can, and it'll help to control these seed heads. And the other thing that happens is that they're putting so much energy towards the seed head right now, the turf tends to thin out. And so the fewer leaves are produced or reproduced. And so this should all pass in 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on the heat and depending on the rain.
All right, thank you, Zach. Kevin, everybody's favorite vegetable with issues, yes?
Yes.
Or fruit, it's a fruit.
Yeah, that's true.
My bad.
Fruit. Yes. Yeah, I have a tomato plant here, and when this tomato plant was a little bit younger, it suffered from what we call edema. And edema is one of our abiotic diseases. It's actually a physiological disorder that's caused by excessive watering and excessive humidity. So you can see on this lateral branch here, we have a little bit of scabbing, and you can see the healthy green part and then this kind of white scabbing. This is what it looks like when the plant grows out of it a little bit. When this plant was younger, those white scabs would have been raised and bumpy. And you'll see raised, bumpy white scabs on both the stems and on the leaves. And these leaves aren't a real good example, but they can get kind of bumpy as well and really rigid. That's a good sign of edema. All you need to do is just cut back on your watering. If there's any way to reduce the humidity where the plants are growing, that will also reduce the likelihood of this happening. We don't see it as often in the garden as we do in the greenhouse or in a nursery when those humidities can get really high. So if you can just increase airflow, reduce the relative humidity, you should be able to reduce the amount of edema that you'll see on your tomato plants.
In other words, no more rain dances at present.
More rain dances. Too much flooding.
All right, Dennis, we know you have something in the bag.
Yeah, of course. In the last month, I've gotten 2 questions from people, one in Furnace County near Farnham and one in Gosford County, about a snake that they said hoods up, which is like a cobra. And let's see if we can get this snake to do it. He's been caught a little bit, but they flatten their head out like a cobra. And it isn't. It's a hognose snake. They're arbitrary frog and toad feeders, and that's all they eat. Really harmless. Some people have called them river adders, but they don't eat. We don't have any adders in Nebraska. All we have is the harmless hognose snake, as you can see from its upturned rostrum or nose. But they will flatten their head out like a cobra. When you go to grab them, every one I've caught, roll over, play dead, and throw up. So it's completely harmless. So if you see something, a snake that flattens out like a cobra in Nebraska, it's just a hognose.
Wonderful. They're really interesting, aren't they? I would never think it would play dead and throw up at the same time.
Is that characteristic? It throws up and plays dead, and thus an identifier of
yeah, really easy to catch.
If that's what you're after.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, Wayne, you get the first picture tonight, and this is a person who sent in these beautiful images of these creatures on a birdhouse, and they sat there all day long, and she is wondering what they are.
Well, those are a pair of our native Cecropia moths. They're what are known as giant silkworms. This is the time of year that the adults are flying. The adults do not feed at all, so their sole purpose is to mate and reproduce. Soon they're going to be laying eggs. They feed on a wide variety of trees, including ash and maples, among other things. Typically, they tend to prefer what they grew up on.
All right, and they really are beautiful, aren't
Yes.
they? Just a beautiful thing. Thanks to that viewer for sending that picture to us. All right, Zach, this is a viewer who has sent us several images of bindweed, including one where he said that the root itself was 36 inches long or whatever, and is wondering, good heavens, is that common, and how do we control bindweed?
Yeah, bindweed can, well, all weeds, especially the perennial weeds that are around for more than 1 year, they will have, a lot of them will have deep roots. And this is a great picture. It's 36 inches long, 30 plus inches long, very typical of bindweed when it's in a soil that is a lighter soil, maybe a sand or a silt loam. Obviously in clay, things like that, it's not going to root that deep. But dandelions will go that deep. Lots of thistle will go that deep. Our perennials tend to go that deep. Can we control it? Bindweed, yes, very easily with quinclorac or drive, but quinclorac is one of the best products for bindweed. And if you apply it, that will also take out crabgrass, which crabgrass is germinating as we speak.
So in a garden, would that be the glove of death to do that? Or
Either very careful, because quinclorac will take out a lot of the broadleaves, including the vegetables, and so that would be a glove of death. And again, once you get into a garden, check those labels really carefully, because you have all these re-entry or edible issues, and we try not to eat the pesticides when we can avoid it.
All right, thanks, Zach. All right, Kevin, we've had an awful lot of questions about this, and we have had some images, but this happens to be one of the, it's either best if you're a pathologist or worst if you have this tree. And that would indeed be a cedar tree, and they
Yes.
apparently have a lot of them, and they have a lot of those, and they're wondering, good heavens, is
Yes.
that what to do? And
Yeah, that's the ever infamous cedar apple rust, which is really prevalent right now. All of the rain and the heavy moisture that we're getting right now is perfect for this particular disease, this phase of the disease. This is the cedar part of the cedar apple rust, and so you'll see these brown masses on the tree that look like cones, and then once we get enough moisture and we get the right temperatures, they'll release those orange teleal horns that look like snot. It's pretty gross. I think it's really cool. So that's a massive infection they have on that tree. You know, the best way to get rid of it is just to pull them off. If you have apple trees you're worried about, there is a spray program. There are fungicides available that you can use to treat your apples to prevent that disease from moving from the cedar trees to the apple trees. The problem is that you want to start those applications around the pink flower bud stage, and we are clearly way past that now with our apples. I think we had another question too, related to someone has a row of cedars, a shelter belt. They want to plant apples. Can they do that? Yes, they can. There are resistant varieties available. Then they also asked whether or not the cedars would still get the galls if they did or did not plant those apple trees. And the thing is that these spores that cause this fungus are very small, and they can travel very far distances in the wind. So whether you have both hosts available or not, you can still get the disease on just one of the plants, either the apple or the cedar.
all right, thank you, Kevin, and that was quite a preponderance of those. Okay, Dennis, this is a really interesting picture, and this is of a squirrel or something. What is that exactly?
Well, this is just to go to show sometimes it might be a release pet. We have what we call fox squirrels in Nebraska. They come in black or the reddish color. But this looks like a gray squirrel, which is mainly east of the Missouri, but we do get a few sometimes in very eastern Nebraska. But this typical small little gray squirrel has white coloration. It's a mutation, and I'm not sure if this mutation was selected for in the pet trade and then it got away, or it's just a natural mutation that someone picked up, but that's what it was from. It's from a little squirrel.
And that particular picture right there, I believe, is
Yeah, that's
squirrel
some
chew?
squirrel damage.
Yeah.
Squirrel were trying to probably get some moisture or get some nutrients from just under the bark in the canyon, and they will actually do a good stripping of that bark, especially on the younger trees, and sometimes the older trees if they really need the moisture in the winter, or during a drought for that matter.
Okay, Wayne, next set of images is actually from you guys. I think Jim sent these in because this is the time of year to treat for this particular beastie. And this is maples with something interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't look very, it looks like snakeskin, Dennis. Kinda.
This is oyster shell scale. And on this image right here, you can see a few holes in some of those scales. That's where parasitic wasps have crawled back out of those. So that is a scale that is dead and gone. However, this time of year, we got to be watching for them. The easiest stage to treat is what we call the crawler stage. It's when the eggs hatch from the female that's been stuck in her position underneath that scale all winter. Crawlers crawl out, they go find a new place to start sucking sap, and they're easiest to treat with an insecticide. Now, you can use some horticultural oils, that'll work. Also, the big thing to watch for as far as timing, snowball viburnum. When it blooms, it's time to go watch for your oyster shell scales to be sending out crawlers. If you're to the scale stage, acephate is the best option at that point.
Snowball viburnums, excellent. So what if you're in a part of the state where they don't grow? Call you guys, right?
You just got to keep a lot closer look on what you're trying to treat.
All right, thanks, Wayne. All right, Zach, this is an interesting, a weed ID, and this is from Minotaur. and it's really, really a cool looking thing. And this particular viewer who sent it in from North Platte said they know it's not snakeweed. Appears to have milkweed-like foliage. There's a lot of it out there in bloom right now. Any idea?
I have no idea. Pass.
So this will be a really good one for us to look.
Actually, because we were Lowell and I were talking about
Yeah.
it tonight, and it looks like it's in a lawn, so we'll buy that. And it looks there's enough woodiness on it. It looks like it's either escaped in the lawn from a bed or something. It just doesn't seem like your average run-of-the-mill turf weed. So again, I have no idea. Stump the panel.
Zach, I see a lot that this time of year in the sandhills along the roadsides
Yeah.
in Cherry County,
Really?
Thomas County, Hooker County.
Yeah.
I don't know it. I don't identify it because I'm too busy looking for snakes. But
I have to get out more.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
Well,
we'll-
we'll
we'll
hold
figure
that
that
thought.
one
Well,
out.
we'll bring it back.
Yeah, we'll figure that one out.
We'll bring it back because Lowell and I both looked at it and we had no clue, which isn't a surprise.
I saw some in Pierce County just.
yeah.
Okay, give it up, people, please.
Just in your weeds.
Yeah. Okay, stop picking on
Doesn't
Zach
grow in
tonight.
Iowa, right? All right, Kevin, this is for you, and then I think Wayne's going to weigh in on this one. This is a viewer from York, which, by the way, we're sorry about that tornado out there. But apparently a large portion of the potato crop was either chewed or got this scabby looking thing on it. They want to know what it is and how they can prevent it from happening again. She did move the location for these, so she rotated her crop.
Yeah, okay. And she still got it.
Well, she doesn't want to get it.
Okay.
So she's hoping she does not have it this year.
Well, it looks like it could be potato scab, or common scab, it's called. To be sure, you'd probably need to send it in for official diagnosis. But if it is potato scab, it's caused by a fungal-like bacterium, which is really neat. It's a bacterium that grows with strands like a fungus, mycelial strands, but they don't care about that. They just want to know what to do with it. So it overwinters in the residues. It can actually pass through an animal's system, and if you add any kind of manure-based fertilizers, you can be spreading this particular fungal-like bacterium around your garden. So what you want to do is rotate away to some kind of a cereal crop if you can. Just any kind of a grass is a non-host, and that if you do that for a couple years, it'll reduce the amount of bacterium in the soil. You can also buy certified disease-free seed. That's the best way to try to prevent it. But she said she was going to move the area in the garden where she was planting potatoes. That's a really good thing to do as well. So, but it could also be caused by insect feeding. Or it could be a combination of the two. You might have had insects feeding, and then you get encroachment by these rotting fungi and bacteria, Wayne, what should she look out for in terms of insects feeding on tubers?
Well, the one thing that I'm thinking of if she moved it to a new area would be that if it's been freshly broken out of grass, she could have some grub problems even in that new area. They will feed on potato tubers, and usually it's only after you've broken out fresh sod for a garden. The other big thing that could be is wireworms. Especially during the heat of the summer, they get down into the soil and they feed on tubers like that. They have a 3 to 6 year life cycle, so
Wow.
you're stuck with those for a while. And since they're soil borne on a vegetable like that, they're next to impossible to treat for.
So peel your potatoes.
Yeah.
Okay. Dennis, you get the next image. And this is a viewer who saw these particular snakes in central Nebraska near Gibbon. And this was actually during March. So they saw these, great picture, wonder what kinds of snakes these are.
It's a cool picture. I like that. You know, I see very little things are cute, not even my grandkid, but that is cute. Those are garter snakes. Those are common garter snakes, Damnophis surtalis. And they're probably emerging out of a rotted stump or something. They can't dig their own holes. Garter snakes can't dig their own holes. They have to use holes of other animals or a rotted area. So there might have been a stump there or something that rotted or something caused a hole, and they're emerging out probably as it's getting warmer.
Excellent. So one of the good guys.
Yeah, insect feeder, worm feeder, minnow feeder, yeah.
All right, Wayne, you get a question from a viewer. They have grapes and strawberries, and they're saying rose chafers are eating the leaves of both of those plants. How would you control that?
So for rose chafer, since it's a chewing insect, I would use carbaryl. In this instance, carbaryl works best in insects that feed on the leaf tissue directly, ingesting it.
And you would not do that when, based on what we
Based
are
on the
lacking.
pre-harvest interval.
And
You don't want to do it when it rains because it'll wash right off.
and those bees,
Don't get it on the flowers.
don't get it on the flowers. Don't kill the bees, in other words, right?
Right.
I'm trying to give you as much help as possible here.
Oh, come on.
Okay, Zach, this is fun. This is an Oconto, Nebraska viewer who wants to know if you can eat bindweed, sort of like lamb's quarters.
My rule is never eat anything in your yard.
Even in the vegetable garden?
Yeah, no, and you're never eat anything out of the lawn, whether it be mushrooms or grass and things like that. So I think you, sure, why not? Give it a whirl.
It's not poisonous.
I don't think it's poisonous, but you know, everything in moderation, especially out of your lawn.
Okay.
That's the closest I'm going to get to a bodily function comment tonight, unlike my two colleagues here.
All right, Kevin. This is a Bloomfield viewer, which is, of course, northeast Nebraska, with a potato question. They're saying the top 4 inches of the leaves are curled and dying, and the lower ones are all right. Any sorts of things that would do that pathologically?
Yeah, when we see that distribution, just the very tops starting to show wilt or curling symptoms, I automatically think that there's probably something going on with the root system. So you might have maybe a Phytophthora or some type of root infecting fungus at play there. Again, it'd be best to send your sample in for diagnostics. There are also some insects, I believe, that will cause leaf curling, some thrips and some mites. I don't know if there's any particular common ones on potato. Wayne, you weren't paying attention.
No, sorry.
Leaf rolling insects on potato, any common ones you know of off the top of your head?
The only thing that I know of that'll cause leaf roll on potato are aphids. If they're in high enough population, they'll cause the leaf to roll up on itself.
Okay, and they'll be pretty present. You'll be able to see aphids right on the stem feeding.
So bring you a piece if they're really concerned.
I would, yeah.
Okay.
If they're thinking about treatment, it's best to, treatment starts with proper diagnosis. So.
Excellent. All right, Dennis, this is a Pierce viewer who has considered planting mothballs in their garden because of the moles and the cutworms, or putting them around them to keep those creatures away, and they're wondering if this is a good idea and would it affect the quality of their produce afterwards.
One thing, it's illegal. Mothballs, if you read the label, are indoor use only. It's paradichlorobenzene or something, or naphthalene. Number 2, it doesn't keep any vermipest away. We've published a number of studies on that. Number 3, if you plant the mothballs, you won't get moths or more balls. You just, it just keeps on coming up. So I would not do it, being the fact that it's going to hurt the soil, if anything.
It's a monster no-no.
Right.
Okay, excellent. This was also sent in by a viewer, I believe, perhaps one of you guys. And this is a gorgeous, gorgeous creature. What is it exactly? Do we see them now, and what do they eat?
Well,
or not?
Mainly, most of our viewers might be familiar with this from the Lunesta commercial.
Oh boy.
They use it there. It's a Luna moth, and it's another one of our giant silkworms the adults don't feed. I can't remember the larval food plant off the top of my head, but again, it's not something that's going to be a problem in any of our plantings. They're generally not in high enough population to cause any
And
real
they're
issues.
quite large, aren't they? The size of
Yes.
your hand, maybe?
They're probably a little bit smaller than the Cecropia moth can be.
But still big enough.
They're still definitely big enough to see
Excellent.
and enjoy.
Thank you. All right, Zach, another unidentified weed question. And this viewer has sent in a couple of images. They wonder if we can figure this out from these pictures. That looks like a tricycle or a bike built for two in the foreground. And I think there's a close-up of the foliage on this one as well.
Yeah, that's especially the size of the bikes. That's a giant ragweed.
Okay.
And control of that right now, that size, cut it down as best you can, but lots of broadleaf weeds will control those better when they're much smaller.
So is it a little unusual for it to be that large this early?
In a corner like that, it could have been a south exposure, it could have been protected, it could have been warmed up, who knows? There's lots of things that wouldn't, when open areas like that, soils have warmed up, and there's could be very tall weeds at this time of the year.
All right, thank you, Zach. Kevin, this is a viewer in Omaha who has 2 lodgepole pines, which is kind of one of our more unusual ones, about 6 feet tall in the backyard. They've been growing pretty slowly for about 10 years. And the top of one of them, which is in the foreground there, appears to have issues. Any ideas on anything that pathology might want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, it's possible that it could be a fungal, foliar fungal disease called Cyrococcus shoot blight. I don't suspect that because typically with that disease, those bare ends will start to curl, and those seem to be pretty straight. From the picture, it appears to be just a winter dieback. We'll see that at the very tips of the trees like that. So, I honestly, from the picture, I don't suspect any pathogenic activity.
Okay, so clip that out and just let the new candle take over, something like that.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Dennis, the Baptisia that Gladys brought in is a good precursor to your question here, because this is a viewer that has what they think is rabbit damage on their Baptisia.
They are.
Sent in a couple of pictures, and they wonder how they can take care of it. They've been spraying a deer repellent on this. They don't know if that's going to work or not.
Probably not. It definitely looks like rabbits. Deer would just take the whole thing, and voles would take it at the bottom and not as much. So I would say rabbits for sure. Exclusion is your best thing for rabbits. If you possibly can fence them out or exclude them. All the repellents are very iffy and spotty on their work. They may work and may not, so if you want to try some of the rabbit repellents as directed, you can try that, but again, very, very spotty. Maybe 25% of the rabbits will be repelled, and that's it. So,
All right.
give it a try, otherwise exclusion.
Okay, Wayne, this is a viewer who has coneflowers in their garden.
All right.
And says that this particular plant went from excellent condition to wilty and croaky overnight, and they kind of pulled the growth out of that and found this sort of creature underneath it, and that's the sort of the base of the remains of the coneflower, and then they found that underneath it. They wonder what it is and how they can keep it from happening to everything else in the garden.
It's highly likely that that is a cutworm. I can't tell you which one from that particular picture. Now, they do this with all kinds of plants. You hear about it in corn, you hear about it in other parts of the garden. They'll clip off at the ground level. They're going to have one generation. If it's a black cutworm, we're not going to see a lot of those. But some of the other cutworms do have multiple generations in a year. If you start seeing the cutting damage, dig around the plant like they kind of did, but try not to disturb the plant and kill it. You can find those worms because they actually feed at night.
Okay.
So they hide in the soil during the day. So if you start seeing the damage, you could apply an insecticide to the base of the plant around the stems.
Or
Squish it.
squish it. Okay.
Kim's
Squish it.
favorite, squish it.
Squish those ickies. All right, Zach, yet one more picture of unwanted grassy species in the wanted grass species. And I know these are very difficult for us to identify, but her question is probably one that is sort of uniformly asked, and that would be, if you have unwanted grassy species in a turf, is there anything that will selectively remove the one without the other?
Yeah, and her question, if I remember right, it was in a nice quality Kentucky bluegrass lawn.
Right.
So I'm guessing it's the thicker bladed stuff that she's worried about right now. And so
Right.
I would guess that's either, at this time of the year, it's either probably brome or quackgrass. And they're both perennials, both spread like by rhizomes. And with those, there's just nothing that's going to control any, there's not many grasses that can be controlled selectively in your turf. It's just because you're trying to control a perennial, and they're very difficult to selectivity, and it's hard. And so either pulling them out will give you short-term control, spot treating with Roundup or glyphosate is going to be your best long-term control, unfortunately. Or you just live with it. You encourage the bluegrass in this case to try to mask everything else.
All right, thanks, Zach. Kevin, you have a couple of different questions about maples. One from a Fairbury viewer who has a lot of dead branches way high in the tree, and a second one from Northwest Iowa with a smaller, actually an amber maple, which is one of the little small ornamentals. Both of them obviously have dead branches in the crown. The first is probably a sugar maple next to a park. The second, the question is this a wilt? Is this environmental?
Yeah, well, with the first picture, that could be just an age issue too. Looks like it's pretty old. It is possible that it's got some kind of a wilt, like verticillium wilt. We had a question about that earlier. Again, submitting a sample is the best way to get that diagnosed. If you're careful, you can take a sharp knife and peel back a layer of the bark on one limb that's kind of dying back, still has some green leaves. And if it is verticillium wilt, you'll see right below that first layer of bark, it'll be pretty clear. You'll see brown streaks in what should be kind of almost a whitish underlying hardwood. If you see brown streaks underneath the bark, that's a good indication that you have verticillium wilt, in which case you would need to replace the tree with something like an oak. In the second picture, the smaller tree, that could be a multitude of things. If they bought it containerized,
Right.
it's possible that it's root bound. So trees that get grown up in pots, they can their roots will start to circle around the inside of that pot, and then once the stem swells, it's encircled with the roots, and then it cuts itself off, and then you'll see top dieback. The other thing too, it looked like it could have been planted a little too deep. You want to make sure that when you plant a tree like that, that you can see the start of the root flare. You don't want a straight stick into the ground. That means it's too deep. You want to see that base of the tree flare out a little bit, right at the soil line. And again, if they are concerned about verticillium wilt, I would suggest submitting a sample.
All right, and probably on that last one, start over with that tree rather than try to prune out that top.
I would think so, yeah. We'll get a replacement in there.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. All right, Dennis, this is a viewer who, they live in Fillmore County, and they have multiple interesting holes in their yard, and they're wondering what has made them and what should they do about it.
Well, that looks like it could be what someone asked about earlier, a skunk going after earthworms or grubs. But it looks like it's dead and dry, so I'm not sure if it was before we had the rains, but it looks like the turf is, oh yeah, definitely something going after grubs. And as well as the way it's pulled up there, that could be a raccoon, but the holes that it showed previously are definitely look like it could be skunk by putting the nose in, whereas the raccoons pull it up with their opposable thumbs and then try to find the grubs and throw them up like popcorn shrimp and catch them. But the skunk just goes after them with the nose.
And really nothing they can do short of eliminating
Well,
the skunk.
eliminating the grub problem is probably number one. And so that would
So
Wayne.
your next question, amazingly, is we have 4 or 5 questions about grubs. This is an Ord viewer, had a lot of grubs last year, didn't realize it, thinking it was drought. Then they saw a lot of grubs, lost a lot of the lawn. They planted a shrub and they found 5 monster 3-year grubs in the hole. Now they're seeing a lot of June bugs fly around, and they're wondering if whatever they treated with did not work. And the second one is growing super hot peppers and found grubs when they dug up the soil to plant the pepper plants.
Well, in a garden, I'll start with the last one first,
Okay.
the pepper part. In a garden like that, the grubs have been taken away from all the grass that was there, if it's been recently converted, and they will eat whatever they can find. They'll be opportunistic at that point.
Okay.
So yes, the roots of your peppers may be in danger of some grub pruning. Now, as far as the turf, if they were 3-year grubs, for the benefit of the other viewers out there, if you flip them over, you look at the back side, on the underside of their back end, you look at the hair pattern, there's a line of 2 in there that makes it look, we call it a zipper.
Okay.
Poor Zach. That's how you know it's a 3-year.
Okay.
If there is no zipper, then it just looks like a random assortment, then it's annual white grub. If there's a V, then it is no longer white, annual white grub or 3-year, it's Japanese beetle.
Oh boy, okay.
All of them are going to be feeding the same turf type area. All could be a problem. The big thing with either the curative, grub control, or preventative is timing. Timing is very huge. If you put on curative too late, and especially with last summer being so advanced, if you put on an imidacloprid type product to get in there for the preventative, you may have been too late on that one and it just didn't get there, and your lawn may have gone dormant on you. If the curatives don't work as good as the preventative.
All right. So timing is everything.
Always.
But right now, the feeding of those grubs, their days are numbered because they're about to
Yes.
start to go through their molting process.
Unless it's in year 2
of
of the 3-year
Right.
grub,
Yeah.
and then they're still going to be feeding pretty heavily.
But as you're starting to put down your grub controls, which will be going down late June, early July, those grub controls will also control those 2 to 3 year grubs in
Yes.
the vast majority of cases. And the 3-year grubs are about this big.
Fishing story here.
Well, no, they're about that. Okay, maybe not that big, but the full-grown Japanese beetle and masked Schaefer, inch and a quarter, whereas the 3-year, those are big. Those are
Yeah, they can get
they're
pretty good
good
size.
size.
You stretch them out, they'll be 1.5 inches to almost getting to 2 inches
They're
on a
pretty good
nice,
size,
healthy, juicy one that
That-
Dennis's
that-
raccoons
oh,
and
they love
skunks
those
would
juicy
love.
ones, yeah.
So rather than looking at their rear end, a ruler might be more effective, or I don't know. I'm just saying.
It depends on how exact you want to be.
Okay.
All right. And
Okay, we
on
digress.
that note,
Okay.
Zach.
Yes.
How do you kill wild onions in the flower beds? This is from Columbus.
How do you kill wild onions? Killing wild onions anywhere is pretty difficult. The best way to kill wild onions is chemically is to sever the tops and then spray them with 2,4-D in a bed. You could probably do a similar thing, except you'd have to use the glove of death again. Wild onions, you could probably, as long as they're in small bunches, you could probably dig those out in a bed because they'll form tubers or bulbs, I should say, and so you could probably dig those out pretty well also.
All right, Kevin, you get a question. You may not like this one very well, but this is a Hamburg, Iowa viewer who has a Chinese elm, so a Siberian elm, 60 years old, big old elm. And they cut a limb out several years ago, and it's dripping something out of the tree that is killing the turf underneath it. And this continues to go on. And
Killing the turf.
No,
killing
this is yours.
the turf.
This is yours.
Zach has already thrown this one your way.
Well, I am not aware of any phytotoxic chemicals that elms produce against turfgrass. That's not to say that that doesn't exist. I think you kind of have to maybe choose one or the other there. You either don't have turfgrass below your tree, or you maybe remove the tree.
Okay,
That's a great
wetwood.
question.
Yeah, it's probably more than likely. It depends what's coming out of that tree,
Yeah.
and odds are it's probably water, and you know that grass is compromised under the tree to begin with. And then by adding extra water, dripping on it constantly, or whenever we get rain, whatever, it's probably adding to the moisture and the diseases and everything else.
All that stuff.
Yes, and exactly another reason why thou shalt not put grass underneath trees.
Okay. Dennis, you have a question from Fort Laramie, Wyoming in our
Okay.
last minute, and this would be, they have blue frogs with 2 stripes on each side and 5 black dots. They wonder if you know what kind they are and are they poisonous?
No, there's no poisonous frogs in the United States, really. Still don't eat them. They do have bufotoxins, some of them. But they're probably a type of leopard frog. Blue coloration of leopard frogs is not that unusual. It's probably one of the Lithobates species. Might be Pipiens or one of the others. But it's a type of leopard frog more than anything else. If I got to see a picture, I could probably narrow it down. So don't worry about them. They're eating insects, and they're not a game species, so don't eat them. And there's no problem.
Excellent. And since you're not on very often, you have 20 seconds to answer this Fremont question
Okay.
about a woodchuck trap. What do you bait them with?
Cucumbers, zucchini. Would I wire it open, let them steal it for a week, and then unwire it because they're very leery about new things and they have a big fuzzy butt, and so they go in very slow and they keep the door open. So you want to get them to go in and out a bunch of times. So I use cucumbers, half an apple, half of a zucchini, anything like that.